For 12 years, I thought I understood marriage.
Not the movie version, not the candlelit, soulmate, hand-in-hand on the beach version people post online when they want strangers to envy them.
I mean, the ordinary version.
The suburban version. Wake up at the same time every morning. Kiss your husband goodbye. Go to work. Answer emails. Review numbers. Come home to dinner, small talk, laundry, and whatever series the two of you are half watching before bed. A steady life. A decent life. The kind of life that doesn't look exciting from the outside, but feels safe when you're inside it.
And I really believed I had that.
I had a stable accounting practice, a 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, 2 cars in the garage, clean countertops, paid bills, predictable routines, a husband who remembered birthdays, smiled in the right places, and always knew exactly how to sound reassuring when I asked, "Are you sure everything's okay?"
I thought I had a real marriage. I was wrong.
Because one Tuesday afternoon, while I was standing in our bedroom, folding my husband's clothes with the kind of mindless concentration that comes from habit, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my college friend Mark. Just one sentence. "Why is your husband wearing a tux in Italy next to a woman in a wedding dress?" At first, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain rejected it so completely that laughter was easier than fear. Then the photo loaded, and just like that, the floor of my life disappeared beneath me. There he was, my husband of 12 years, standing on a sun-drenched coastline in Italy, smiling like a man who had never lied a day in his life. Beside him was a woman in an expensive white dress, her hand in his body turned toward hers in that intimate, effortless way that no one has to explain when it's real. But that wasn't the part that nearly stopped my heart. The part that shattered me was who stood behind them. His parents, his sisters, his brother, his aunt, his whole family. All dressed for a wedding, all smiling for photos, all watching my husband marry another woman while I was still legally his wife. And when I looked up from my phone, still trying to breathe, I saw something waiting for me on the fridge. A grocery list, like I was still the one expected to keep the house running while they played happy family in Italy. That was the moment I realized my marriage hadn't died that day. It had been rotting for years. I just hadn't smelled it yet. My name is Claire Bennett, and at the time everything fell apart, I was 41 years old. I was a CPA with my own small accounting practice. Nothing flashy, but stable, respected, and built through years of discipline. I liked structure. I liked things balanced, documented, and done properly. I was the kind of woman who color-coded files, paid bills early, and kept emergency folders for emergencies that never came. Or at least, that was the theory. My husband, Ethan Bennett, was charming in ways that looked harmless if you didn't study them too closely. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, which meant he knew how to talk to anyone. He could make waiters laugh, calm down angry clients, and tell a story in a way that made even ordinary details feel polished. When we met, that charm felt warm. Later, I would understand how dangerous it was. We met at a charity fundraiser downtown. I had gone because a client invited me, and I remember feeling slightly underdressed and deeply uninterested in mingling. Ethan was standing near the bar, holding a glass of something expensive looking, laughing with 2 men in tailored suits. He noticed me before I noticed him. "You look like you'd rather be audited than stay at this event another 10 minutes, he said when he walked over. I gave him a flat look. "That depends. Is the auditor competent?" He laughed, a real laugh, quick and bright. Okay, that was good. There was something easy about him then. He wasn't pushy. He wasn't arrogant. He seemed attentive in the kind of way that makes a woman feel seen. He asked about my work and actually listened to the answer. He remembered things I mentioned in passing. He sent flowers to my office after our 3rd date, not red roses, but white lilies, because I'd once said I hated cliché romance. That detail stayed with me for years, not because of the flowers, because I mistook observation
for devotion.
We dated for 2 years before getting married. Those years felt solid. Ethan said all the right things, but more importantly, he knew when to say nothing at all. If I had a difficult day, he'd bring takeout and rub the tension out of my shoulders. If I worried about money while building my practice, he'd say, "You're going to be more than fine, Claire. You're the most capable person I know."
And I believed him. When he proposed, it was simple. No flash mob, no photographers hidden in bushes, just dinner on our back patio of the townhouse I owned before we married, candles flickering in glass holders, and Ethan looking strangely nervous as he took out a ring. "I know you don't need anyone," he told me softly. "That's one of the things I love most about you. But I still want to be the person who gets to stand beside you." It was exactly the kind of proposal I would have wanted. Quiet, thoughtful, mature. I said yes, without hesitation. The first few years of marriage were good, at least good enough that I didn't question them. We settled into a rhythm. My practice grew. Ethan's job became more demanding. We moved into a larger house in a good neighborhood, though legally the property stayed in my name because I had purchased it before marriage and handled the refinancing decisions myself. At the time, that had seemed practical, not symbolic. Ethan used to joke about it. "Honestly, thank God one of us understands paperwork," he'd say, tossing me a grin. "If the world ended, you'd still have receipts." And I'd smile because it felt like appreciation. His family was never quite as easy. His mother, Patricia Bennett, had the polished, invasive warmth of a woman who asked personal questions while pretending she was being loving. His father, Henry Bennett, liked to present himself as the wise head of the family, but most of his wisdom involved excusing Ethan and expecting everyone else to be understanding. Ethan's sisters, Natalie and Emma, moved through life with the confidence of women accustomed to someone else cleaning up their messes. His younger brother, Tyler, floated from plan to plan without ever landing anywhere for long. And then there was Aunt Diane, who smelled like incense and spoke as if every inconvenience were part of a cosmic lesson. They were close, sometimes so close it felt less like family and more like a private club where loyalty mattered more than truth. At first, I tried very hard with them. I hosted holidays, remembered birthdays, bought thoughtful gifts, sent flowers when someone was sick, balanced the seating chart at Thanksgiving like it was an international peace negotiation. I told myself the coolness I sensed from Patricia would thaw eventually. I told myself Natalie's passive-aggressive comments were just her personality. I told myself that if I kept showing up with enough grace, enough patience, enough effort, I would stop feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. But there were small things, always small at first. Ethan's family would make plans and forget to include me until the last minute. Patricia would call him directly about family matters, even when I was the one coordinating schedules. If money came up, help for Tyler, a temporary loan for Natalie, some sudden crisis involving Emma, it was somehow assumed that Ethan and I would contribute, though in reality, I was usually the one making sure the numbers worked. And Ethan always had a way of smoothing it over. "Don't take Mom personally. Emma doesn't mean anything by it. You know how this family is." I did know. That was the problem. Because over the years, I also started knowing other things. Uncomfortable things. Things I kept explaining away because the alternative was too ugly to name. Ethan traveled constantly for work. Chicago, Boston, Atlanta, sometimes Miami, sometimes Napa. There was always a conference, a client dinner, a regional meeting, a networking retreat. At least that was what he told me. He was gone 2 weeks out of every month, sometimes more. And because I loved him, and because love makes fools out of intelligent women every day, I accepted it. I ignored how conveniently his travel photos were always vague. Hotel bar, airport lounge, plate of food, skyline from a window. Never coworkers, never meetings, never anything concrete enough to verify. I ignored how his suitcase sometimes carried the faint scent of expensive women's perfume that wasn't mine. I ignored the occasional charge that didn't make sense until he gave it a smooth explanation. Client gift for a physician contact. Hotel mixed up the billing. I ignored how distant he could become right after coming home, as if part of him hadn't fully returned yet. And that tightening in my stomach, that pause before I asked a question. I told myself that marriage required trust. I told myself that suspicion could destroy a good man. I told myself that not every silence meant betrayal. What I did not tell myself, what I could not yet admit, was that I had slowly become a woman who worked hard to preserve the appearance of peace because some part of me was already afraid of the truth. And the truth, when it finally came, did not arrive gently. It arrived in a photo from Italy, with a white dress, a tuxedo, and an entire family smiling in the background, like my place in the story had already been erased. Looking back now, the truth didn't start with that photo. It started years earlier, quietly, subtly, almost politely, the kind of betrayal that doesn't kick down the door. It slips in through a crack you didn't think mattered. At first, it was just the travel. Ethan's job had always required movement, but somewhere around year 6 of our marriage, it shifted from busy to something else, something harder to define. He stopped talking about his trips in detail. Before, he'd tell me small things, annoying clients, delayed flights, the terrible coffee in certain cities, ordinary complaints that made his absence feel real, grounded. But then those details disappeared. Same old, he'd say if I asked. Nothing exciting, and I accepted that answer far longer than I should have. One night, I remember standing in the kitchen while he packed for another trip. His suitcase was open on the counter, neatly organized, as always. "You're going to Chicago again?" I asked. "Mm-hmm," he replied, folding his shirt without looking up. "For how long?" 3 days, maybe 4. "Maybe?" He smiled, quick and disarming. "Depends on how the meetings go." I leaned against the counter watching him. "You've been to Chicago 3 times this month." "Big market," he said easily. "Lots of opportunity." I nodded. And then I said nothing else. Because even then, I felt it. That quiet hesitation sitting just behind my ribs. But instead of following it, I pushed it down. That became a pattern. There were other things too. Small, almost ridiculous details that didn't seem worth confronting on their own. A restaurant charge in Boston that appeared on a night he told me he had eaten alone in his hotel room. A photo he posted once, just once, where a reflection in a window showed someone sitting across from him. A woman, maybe, or maybe not. It was too blurry to prove anything. A receipt for 2 glasses of wine when he claimed he wasn't drinking that week. Each time, I asked lightly. Each time, he answered smoothly. Each time, I chose to believe him. Because the alternative would have required me to dismantle everything I had built my life around. And I wasn't ready to do that. His family didn't help. If anything, they made it worse. There was always a strange energy when they were around. Like they knew something I didn't. Patricia especially had this way of looking at me during dinners. Not unkind, not openly hostile, just knowing. Like I was a guest in a story that wasn't mine. One Sunday afternoon, about a year before everything exploded, we were at his parents' house for lunch. Patricia was pouring wine. "You must get lonely," she said suddenly, handing me a glass. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "With Ethan traveling so much," she continued, her tone soft, almost sympathetic. "That kind of lifestyle isn't for everyone." I glanced at Ethan. He didn't look up. Just kept scrolling on his phone. "I manage," I said carefully. Patricia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you do. You've always been very self-sufficient." The way she said it made it sound like a flaw. Across the table, Natalie let out a quiet laugh. Emma hid a smirk behind her glass. "And Ethan?" He said nothing. That silence lingered with me long after we left. Later that night, I brought it up. "Your mom's comment earlier," I said as we got ready for bed. "What was that about?" Ethan sighed like I'd asked something unreasonable. "She worries, Claire, that's all." "Worries about what?" "That you're alone too much." I stared at him. "I'm not alone. I'm married." He shrugged, pulling off his shirt. "You know what I mean." No, I didn't. But I let it go. Again. Because by then, I had trained myself to smooth over discomfort instead of examining it. but the cracks were widening. There was one moment I couldn't quite forget, no matter how much I tried. It was late, maybe past midnight. Ethan had just come back from a conference in Atlanta. I was half asleep when I heard his phone buzz on the nightstand. He reached for it immediately, too quickly. I opened my eyes just enough to see the screen light up. A name. Not saved, just a number. And beneath it, a message preview. Miss you already. My chest tightened. Who is that? I asked quietly. Ethan froze for half a second. Just half, but it was enough. Then he turned, already composed. Wrong number, he said, dismissing it with a swipe. At midnight? Time zones, he replied smoothly. Probably someone texting the wrong contact. I watched him for a long moment. Then I nodded and turned away because something inside me was already whispering the truth, and I was still refusing to listen. By the time that Tuesday came, the day Mark sent me that photo, my life wasn't as solid as I thought it was. It just hadn't collapsed yet. All the signs had been there. The distance, the silence, the subtle disrespect from his family, the inconsistencies I kept explaining away, the message in the middle of the night, the feeling that I was standing just outside my own marriage, knocking on a door that no one intended to open. And still, I stayed. Still, I trusted. Still, I folded his clothes, paid our bills, kept our life running like a machine that only I seemed to maintain. Until the moment that machine finally broke. Not with a quiet crack, but with a wedding. In Italy, without me. I don't remember breathing. That's the first thing I realized later. When I tried to replay that moment in my mind, everything was sharp except for my own body. My hands were still holding Ethan's shirt, half folded. My phone was in my other hand. But my lungs, they forgot how to work. The photo on my screen didn't change. It didn't glitch. It didn't blur. It didn't disappear like some cruel illusion. It stayed. Bright. Clear. Unmistakable. Ethan stood there in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his hand wrapped around the fingers of a woman in a white dress that clung to her like something out of a luxury bridal campaign. The sunlight hit the coastline behind them. Blue water, cliffs, flowers, the kind of place people travel across the world to say vows. And he was smiling. Not the polite smile he gave neighbors. Not the tired smile he gave me after long trips. This was different. This was full, open, unburdened. Like a man who wasn't hiding anything at all. My thumb trembled as I swiped to the next photo Mark had sent. Then the next, then the next. There was champagne. Crystal glasses catching the golden light of sunset. There was a long table set for dinner, draped in white linen, surrounded by people laughing. His people. Henry raising a glass like he was proud. Patricia standing too close to the couple, her hand resting possessively on Ethan's arm. Natalie and Emma leaning in for photos, their faces glowing with excitement. Tyler holding up his phone, recording everything. Aunt Diane, of course, wrapped in flowing scarves, looking like she'd predicted this moment in a dream. And then, the kiss. I stopped there. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down. Not because it was shocking anymore, but because it was undeniable. He kissed her like a husband, like a man who belonged to the woman in front of him. Not like someone making a mistake, not like someone confused, but like someone who had already chosen. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Mark. Claire, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how else to tell you. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't reply because I didn't have words yet. I didn't even have thoughts. Just a strange, hollow clarity spreading through my chest. The kind of clarity that comes when something breaks so completely, your mind stops trying to fix it. I stood up slowly, walked out of the bedroom, down the hallway, into the kitchen. Everything looked exactly the same. The counter was clean. The coffee maker sat where it always did. The fridge hummed softly. And there, right in the center, held in place by that ridiculous beach ball magnet Ethan had insisted on buying during some vacation years ago, a grocery list written in his handwriting. Organic quinoa, almond milk, unsweetened, kale, the expensive one, luxury toilet paper, Mom coming next week. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed. Not loudly, not hysterically, just quietly. Because Patricia wasn't coming next week. Patricia was in Italy, watching her son marry another woman. My husband. I reached up and pulled the list off the fridge. The paper crinkled in my hand, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt something rise inside me. Something sharp. Something hot. Anger. But it didn't explode. It settled. Deep. Cold. Precise. I walked back to the table and sat down, picked up my phone, and finally dialed his number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, voicemail. Hey, it's Ethan. I'm probably in a meeting or on a flight. Leave a message and I'll call you back. His voice. Calm. Normal. Like he wasn't standing in another country wearing a wedding ring that didn't belong to me. I hung up without speaking. Tried again. This time it didn't even ring. Straight to voicemail. I stared at the screen. Then I opened our message thread. Scrolled. Months of safe flight. Call me when you land. Do you want me to pick up dinner? Miss you. All of it. So ordinary, so real, and yet somehow not enough to stop him from doing this. My phone buzzed again. Mark, calling this time, I answered. There was a pause on the other end. Then softly, Claire, did you see everything? Yes, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. You okay? I looked around the kitchen. At the house I had built, at the life I had believed in, at the silence that now felt like something entirely different. No, I said honestly. Then I added after a beat, but I will be. Mark didn't speak for a moment. Then, cautiously, what are you going to do? That question hung in the air. Simple, direct, terrifying. I looked down at the grocery list still crumpled in my hand, then at the folder of financial documents I had been reviewing earlier that morning, then back at my phone, at the photos, at Ethan, smiling, happy, free, as if I didn't exist. And something inside me shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I'm going to think, I said. My voice was steady now, clear. Very carefully, I ended the call, set the phone down, walked to the coffee maker, poured myself a cup, strong, black, no sugar, the kind I only drank when I needed to focus. Then I grabbed a legal pad from my office drawer, sat at the kitchen table, and started writing. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It rewires your mind. And as I sat there, pen moving slowly across paper, listing every asset, every account, every detail of the life we had built, I realized something Ethan clearly never had. He thought I was the stable one, the predictable one, the woman who would cry, beg, wait. But he forgot one very important detail. I was also the woman who owned everything. And for the first time since I saw that photo, I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I finally understood what came next. I didn't cry that day, not when I saw the photos, not when I called Ethan and he didn't answer, not when I realized his entire family had known and chosen silence. Instead, I sat at that kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold beside me and a legal pad filling up line by line. House, accounts, investments, vehicles, insurance policies, subscriptions, every single thing tied to our life, to my life. My handwriting was steady, too steady, like I was doing someone else's work. But inside, it wasn't calm. It was something else. A strange combination of shock and clarity. Because once the illusion was gone, everything started making sense. Every late night message, every business trip, every uncomfortable dinner with his family, every moment I had silenced my instincts just to keep the peace. I hadn't been paranoid. I had been patient in the face of dishonesty. And patience in the wrong relationship becomes self-betrayal. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. How long? I whispered to the empty room. Not out loud,
for anyone to hear, just for myself. How long had he been building another life? Months? Years? And worse, how long had his family known? That question hurt more than the wedding. Because betrayal from one person is devastating. But betrayal from an entire room of people? That's something else entirely. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Mark. It was Ethan. A message. In meetings all day, flight later, talk tonight? I stared at the screen for a long time. My chest tightened, but not the way it had before. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was recognition. He was still lying. Even now. Even after everything. I typed a response, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, I locked the phone and set it face down on the table. No. Not yet. If there was one thing I understood clearly in that moment, it was this. Emotion was a liability, and I couldn't afford to be emotional right now. I needed to be precise. That evening, I walked through the house slowly, room by room, not as a wife, as an observer. The living room, neutral tones, clean lines, the couch we'd picked together after arguing for 2 hours about fabric. The dining table, 12 seats, rarely filled. The bedroom, neatly made, as if nothing had ever happened. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same, because now I knew the truth. This wasn't a shared life. It was a life I had been maintaining while he lived another one, somewhere else. I paused at the doorway of the bedroom. My eyes moved to his closet. Half empty. Not noticeably. Not enough for me to question it before. But now I saw it. The missing pieces, the carefully spaced hangers, the subtle absence. He hadn't just been traveling. He had been dividing himself between 2 lives, 2 women, 2 versions of truth. I stepped inside, ran my fingers lightly over the shirts that remained, folded, organized, familiar. And suddenly, for the first time that day, I felt it. The pain, not loud. Not explosive, just deep. A slow, heavy ache in my chest. 12 years, I whispered. My voice broke slightly on the word years. I sat down on the edge of the bed, let my hands rest in my lap, closed my eyes, and asked myself the question I had avoided for so long. What did I ignore? The answer came quickly. Everything. Not because I was weak, but because I was loyal. Because I believed in commitment. Because I thought love meant staying, even when things felt off. Because I trusted him, and that trust had been used against me. I exhaled slowly, opened my eyes, and something inside me settled again. Not numbness, not denial, but decision. I stood up, walked back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and this time, when I unlocked it, I didn't hesitate. I scrolled to his contact, hit call. It rang once, twice. Then he answered. Hey, Claire. His voice came through, casual, warm. I was just about to call you. Where are you? I interrupted. A pause. Short, but real. Chicago, he said. I closed my eyes for a second. Just one. Then opened them again. Are you sure about that? Another pause. Longer this time. What do you mean? I walked to the fridge. Looked at the empty space where the grocery list had been. I mean, I said slowly, that Chicago doesn't look like the Amalfi Coast. Silence. Heavy. Thick. Unavoidable. I could hear his breathing now. Faster. Less controlled. Claire, who is she? I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse, didn't cry, just asked. Straight. Direct. And for the first time in 12 years, Ethan didn't have an immediate answer. I can explain, he finally said. Of course he could. They always can. I let out a small, humorless breath. No, I said quietly. You can't. Another silence. Then, softer now. It's not what you think. I almost smiled. Because somehow, even now, he thought I didn't know. I saw the photos, Ethan, I said. My friend sent them to me. Another pause. And then, Claire, listen. Are you married to her? That question landed hard. I could feel it through the phone. He didn't answer, and in that silence, I got everything I needed. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. 12 years, I said, my voice finally trembling just a little. 12 years, Ethan. I know. No, I cut him off. You don't. I swallowed. Forced the emotion back down. You don't get to say anything right now. Another breath. Slow. Controlled. When are you coming home? Thursday. Good. There was confusion in his voice now. Claire, what? I'll be here, I said. And then, after a beat, don't be late, I hung up. Set the phone down. And stood there in the middle of the kitchen, alone, but not lost anymore, because now I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. And whatever Ethan thought he was coming home to, it wasn't going to be the same woman he left behind. The next 7 days felt longer than the entire 12 years of my marriage combined. Not because time slowed down, but because I stopped living inside it. I moved through my days like a woman on autopilot, waking up, going to work, answering emails, reviewing financial statements, smiling at clients, while underneath, something far more precise was unfolding. Every night, I came home and sat at the kitchen table. Same chair, same position, same legal pad. But now, the list had evolved. It wasn't just assets anymore. It was strategy. And the more I wrote, the clearer everything became. Because unlike Ethan, I didn't operate on impulse. I operated on structure, on documentation, on proof. And that week, I built something airtight. Meanwhile, Ethan and his family were still living their fantasy. I didn't have to imagine it. They made sure I could see everything. Because apparently, when you destroy someone's life, the appropriate next step is to post about it. Every platform, every day, every detail. It started with Instagram, a photo of Ethan and the woman, Lila, on a gondola in Venice. She leaned into him like she belonged there. He looked relaxed. The caption? Forever starts here. #new beginnings. #love wins. I stared at it for a long time. Then I took a screenshot, filed it, moved on. Next came Facebook. Patricia posted a full album, dozens of photos, dinner tables, wine glasses, sunset views, family group shots. One image stopped me. Patricia standing between Ethan and Lila, her arms wrapped around both of them, smiling like she had orchestrated the entire thing. Caption: so proud of my son for following his heart. I let out a quiet breath. Then I saved that too. Because this wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This was collective, deliberate, supported. By Wednesday, I had a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence, No Remorse. Inside it, screenshots, dates, captions, comments, even likes. Every piece of public proof that Ethan and his family weren't confused. They weren't conflicted. They weren't apologetic. They were celebrating. And that mattered, because truth isn't just what happened. It's how people behave after it happens. Mark called me almost every day. Claire, are you sure you're okay? He asked on Thursday. I'm working, I replied. That's not what I asked. I paused. Looked down at the stack of documents in front of me. I'm focused. There was silence on the other end. Then he said carefully, you sound different. I almost laughed. I am. Ethan texted twice during that week. Nothing dramatic. Nothing revealing. Just normal. Flight delayed. Talk soon. Long day. Miss you. Miss you. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I placed my phone face down and continued reviewing property records. Because those words meant nothing anymore. They weren't emotional. They were procedural. Just like everything else he did. But the real escalation didn't come from Ethan. It came from his family. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Patricia. I stared at the screen. Let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Hello? Claire, she said, her voice warm, too warm. How are you, dear? Dear. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I'm fine, I replied. A pause. Then,
We've been trying to reach you, she continued. Ethan mentioned you sounded upset. Upset. I almost smiled. I saw the photos, I said simply. Silence. Then a sigh. Claire, we were going to talk to you when we got back. When you got back? I repeated. Yes, it's complicated. No, I said quietly. It's not. Another pause. Longer this time. Claire, Patricia said, her tone shifting slightly. Sometimes relationships evolve. Sometimes people grow apart. I closed my eyes. Let that sink in. You mean, I said slowly, sometimes your son marries another woman while still married to me. Her voice sharpened just a fraction. That's not a fair way to describe it. I opened my eyes, looked straight ahead. It's the accurate way. Silence again. Then, you're being emotional. That word. Emotional. It landed exactly the way she intended. Dismissive. Reducing. Invalidating. And in that moment, something inside me clicked fully into place. No, I said calmly. I'm being observant. She didn't respond immediately, so I continued. You all knew, didn't you? Another pause. He's been unhappy for a long time, Claire. I let out a slow breath. That's not what I asked. Silence. And there it was, my answer. After the call ended, I sat very still, hands resting on the table, heart steady, mind clear, because now there was no ambiguity left, no misunderstanding, no gray area. They hadn't just accepted it, they had supported it, encouraged it, celebrated it, and then expected me to, what? Wait quietly? Be understanding? Stay in place while they replaced me? I reached for my pen again, turned to a new page, and wrote one sentence across the top. No more negotiation. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was upset, but because I was thinking, refining, finalizing. Because the plan I had started earlier that week, it wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about making sure that when Ethan came back, he understood exactly what he had lost. Not emotionally, not symbolically, but concretely, legally, irreversibly. Sunday evening arrived quietly. The house was still, the neighborhood calm, and I sat on the back porch with a glass of water, watching the sun dip below the horizon. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, strangely peaceful, like the calm before something definitive. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a contact I hadn't needed in years. David Chen, the attorney who had helped me with contracts, estate planning, and every major financial decision I'd made. Sharp, efficient, unapologetically thorough, exactly what I needed. I stared at his name for a few seconds, because this was the point of no return. Once I made this call, there would be no going back, no conversations, no reconciliation, no pretending, just action. Clean, final. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Claire, everything okay? I let out a slow breath. No. A pause. Then his tone changed instantly. What's going on? I looked out at the fading light, at the house behind me, at the life that was already ending. My husband, I said calmly, just married another woman in Italy. Silence. Then, I'm going to need you to repeat that. I did. Every detail. The photos. The family. The timeline. The assets. And when I finished, there was a brief pause. Then David exhaled, slow, impressed. Well, he said, that's unusually straightforward. I almost smiled. I thought you'd appreciate that. Oh, I do, he replied. I really, really do. A beat. Then his voice sharpened. Tell me one thing, Claire. Yes? Everything is in your name, right? I looked back at the house, at everything inside it, everything I had built, everything they thought they owned. Yes, I said, every single thing. Another pause. Then, good, David said. And there was something in his voice now, not sympathy, not concern, Something else, something colder, more precise. Then we're not dealing with damage control anymore. I felt my grip on the phone tighten slightly. What are we dealing with? He didn't hesitate. Execution. And just like that, the plan became real. The night after I spoke to David, the house felt different. Not empty. Not yet, but quieter in a way that made every sound feel intentional. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway, the soft creak of the floorboards when I walked from room to room. It was the same house, but I was no longer the same woman inside it. I moved slowly that evening. No music, no television, just silence. Because for the first time since everything began, there was nothing left to distract me. No lists to write, no calls to make, no strategy to build. The plan was already in motion. And that left me alone with something I had managed to hold off until now. The weight of it. All of it. I stood in the living room and looked around. The couch where we had spent quiet evenings side by side, sometimes talking, sometimes not. The coffee table with faint scratches from years of use. The shelf with framed photos, holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, memories, or at least what I had believed were memories shared. I walked over to the shelf, picked up one of the frames. It was from our 10th anniversary. We were standing on a beach, the wind pulling at my hair, Ethan's arm around my shoulders. We looked happy. I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb. Was that real? I whispered. The question didn't sound dramatic. It sounded tired, because that was the real damage. Not just that he had betrayed me, but that he had rewritten the past without telling me. 12 years of moments that I thought meant something. Now, I didn't know what any of them meant anymore. I set the frame back down carefully, too carefully, like it might break if I didn't. Then I sat on the couch, and finally, I let myself feel it, not the anger. That had already settled into something colder. Not the strategy. That was already complete. But the loss. It came quietly. A tightening in my chest. A heaviness behind my ribs. My hands clasped together in my lap as if I could hold myself steady from the inside. I stayed, I murmured. That realization hit harder than anything else. I stayed. Through the distance. Through the silence, through the small signs that something wasn't right, I stayed because I believed in us. And somewhere along the way, that belief had become one-sided. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees, staring at the floor. There were no tears at first, just that pressure, that ache. But then one slipped out anyway, just one, followed by another. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just honest, because I wasn't mourning Ethan. Not really. I was mourning the version of my life I thought I had. The version where loyalty mattered, where effort meant something, where 12 years couldn't be erased by a plane ticket and a ceremony in another country. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, took a slow breath, and let it out. You're allowed to feel this, I said quietly to myself. Because strength doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means not letting that pain decide what you do next. I sat there for a long time, minutes, maybe hours. Time felt irrelevant. At some point, my phone buzzed again. I didn't reach for it immediately, but eventually I did. A message from Ethan. Claire, please, we need to talk. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. I stared at the words. Read them once. Twice, then a third time, and something about that sentence, that specific sentence, shifted something inside me again. Not anger, not sadness, something sharper, clearer. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I hurt you. Not, I was wrong. Just regret about the timing. I let out a slow breath, set the phone down, and leaned back against the couch, because in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a decision. A series of decisions made over time, supported by his family, protected by silence, and executed without hesitation. And the only part that had gone wrong was that I found out before he was ready to manage it. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since everything began, I felt something close to acceptance. Not forgiveness, not peace, but acceptance of reality. Ethan wasn't the man I married. Maybe he never was. Or maybe he changed. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this. I had been loyal. I had been honest. I had built something real, and that mattered. Even if he had chosen to walk away from it. I opened my eyes again, looked around the room one more time, and this time, I didn't see memories. I saw closure. Because this house, this life, this version of me was already ending, and tomorrow, everything would begin to change. Not because of what Ethan did, but because of what I chose to do next. I reached for my phone again, opened his message, and without overthinking it, I typed a response. "We will talk. Thursday." I hit send, placed the phone back down, and stood up. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Because the lowest point wasn't when I saw the wedding. It wasn't when his family chose him over truth. It wasn't even when I realized how long the lies had been going on. The lowest point was right here, when I fully accepted that what I had lost was never coming back. And strangely, that acceptance didn't break me. It freed me. Monday morning arrived with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not relief, just precision. The kind that comes when emotion has already burned through and left something sharper behind. I dressed simply, neutral tones, clean lines, nothing that drew attention. Pulled my hair back, minimal makeup. The version of me that clients trusted. The version of me that made decisions without hesitation. Because today wasn't about healing. It was about action. David's office was exactly as I remembered it. Dark wood, clean surfaces, everything in its place. He greeted me at the door with a look that was almost impressed. "You look composed," he said. "I am." He then nodded. "Good, let's begin." We sat across from each other in the conference room. I laid out everything. Property deeds, bank statements, investment portfolios, vehicle titles, insurance documents, every piece of paper that proved one simple truth. Everything was in my name. David went through them methodically. No rush, no wasted movement. When he finished reviewing the house deed, he leaned back slightly. "This is clean," he said. "You purchased it before the marriage. No joint refinancing, no added ownership. Legally, this is yours, entirely." I nodded. "I want it sold." He didn't blink. "Fast or optimal price?" "Fast." A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I thought so." We moved to the accounts. "Joint accounts are more delicate," he continued. "You're still legally married. You're entitled to your share, but we need to be careful not to trigger any claims of misconduct." "I don't want everything," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "No?" I shook my head. "Take exactly half, move it into a new account, leave the rest untouched." There was a brief pause. Then David let out a quiet breath. "That's very controlled of you." "It's not about taking from him," I replied. "It's about making sure he doesn't benefit from me anymore." He nodded slowly. "Understood." The rest unfolded quickly. Precise, efficient, legal. We contacted a real estate agent he trusted, a woman named Michelle, sharp and fast-moving, the kind of person who didn't waste time on sentiment. She walked through the house that afternoon, eyes scanning, mind calculating. "I can sell this in 10 days, she said confidently. "Maybe less." "Do it," I replied. By Wednesday, there were offers. By Friday, one was accepted. A young couple. New baby. Excited. Hopeful. They didn't ask why I was selling so quickly, and I didn't offer an explanation. Some truths aren't meant for strangers. Packing began immediately, and that's when something unexpected happened. It didn't feel painful. It felt cleansing. Room by room, I sorted everything into 3 categories. Mine, his, irrelevant. The couch, irrelevant. The dining table? Irrelevant. The bed? I paused there for just a moment. Then, irrelevant, because that bed didn't represent love anymore, just habit. And habit is replaceable. I kept only what belonged to me. My clothes, my books, my laptop, a few personal items, and some photos. But not the ones from our marriage. Those stayed behind because I wasn't taking memories that no longer felt true. By the weekend, I had moved into a new apartment. It was different. Open space, exposed brick, large windows, minimal, quiet. Empty in a way that didn't feel lonely, but free. Mark helped with the move. He didn't ask many questions, just handed me boxes, made dry jokes, and occasionally glanced at me like he was trying to understand how I was still standing. At one point, he said quietly, "You're handling this better than I expected." I paused, looked around the apartment, then back at him. "I'm not handling it," I said. "I'm finishing it." By Sunday night, everything was done. The house was sold. The money transferred. The accounts separated. The locks, passwords, access, everything changed. There was nothing left tying me to the life Ethan thought he was coming back to. Nothing. But there was one final thing, one detail I hadn't planned initially, but once the idea formed, I couldn't ignore it. Monday evening, I drove back to the house, let myself in one last time. It was empty now. Completely. The echoes of my footsteps followed me through the space. I stood in the living room, looked around slowly, and felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, just distance. Like I was standing in a place that no longer belonged to me, because it didn't. I took out a piece of paper, a thick marker, and wrote in large, clear letters, "Welcome home. I hope you didn't lose your values at customs." I taped it to the wall, right where it would be seen immediately. Then I stepped back, looked at it, and allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Not out of spite, but out of closure. I walked to the door, paused, took one last look at the space that had once been my life, then turned off the lights, locked the door, and left. The turning point wasn't when I saw the wedding. It wasn't when I confronted Ethan. It wasn't even when I decided to act. The turning point was this: when I realized I wasn't reacting to betrayal anymore. I was reclaiming control. And by the time Ethan stepped off that plane, there would be nothing left for him to return to. 2 weeks later, everything was quiet. Too quiet. My new apartment felt nothing like the old house, and that was exactly the point. No shared memories, no ghosts, no traces of a life that had been quietly replaced behind my back. I had already moved on in every practical sense, but there was one thing left. Not revenge, not confrontation, just observation, because actions have consequences. And sometimes you need to witness them to fully understand that you made the right decision. I parked across the street from what used to be my house. A large coffee in one hand, a bag of popcorn in the other. Yes, petty, but also honest. Because after everything, I wanted to see it. The moment reality caught up to them. The new owners had already moved in. A minivan sat in the driveway. One of those stick figure family decals on the back window. Normal people, uncomplicated lives. The kind of life I thought I had. At exactly 2:03 p.m., my phone buzzed. A notification from the home security system I hadn't disconnected yet. Motion detected at front door. My heart didn't race. It sharpened. I adjusted slightly in my seat, watched. And then they arrived. 3 taxis, one after another. Doors opening, people stepping out. Ethan first. Of course, he looked good, rested, tanned, like someone who had just returned from a beautiful trip. Right behind him, her, Lila. The woman in the white dress, now in casual clothes, sunglasses perched on her head, her hand brushing lightly against Ethan's arm like it belonged there. Like she belonged there. Then came the rest. Henry and Patricia,
looking slightly tired but still composed. Natalie and Emma already on their phones. Tyler dragging luggage. Aunt Diane floating behind them like she'd just stepped out of a different dimension. They laughed, talked, organized their bags, completely unaware. And then Ethan turned toward the house. I watched his face carefully, closely. The moment it changed was immediate. Confusion first, then a slight frown, then something sharper. He stepped forward, stopped, looked again, like the house itself had shifted when he wasn't looking. Patricia moved beside him. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer, because now he understood. "Is this the wrong address?" Natalie asked, glancing up from her phone. "No," Ethan said slowly. His voice had changed. Tight, controlled. "This is the house." Henry stepped forward, looked at the driveway, at the unfamiliar car, at the small changes, and then the front door opened. The new owner stepped out. A man in his early 30s, calm, confused, polite. "Can I help you?" he asked. Ethan turned to him. "What are you doing in my house?" The man blinked. "Your house?" "Yes," Ethan snapped. "We live here." A pause. Then, "Sir, we bought this house 2 weeks ago." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Immediate. I watched Patricia's hand fly to her chest, watched Henry's expression freeze, watched Natalie and Emma finally look up from their phones, watched Tyler drop one of the suitcases. And Ethan just stood there, like his brain hadn't caught up yet. "That's not possible," he said. But it wasn't confident. It wasn't strong. It sounded like someone already losing. The new owner shook his head slightly. "We closed last Thursday. Everything's official. I have the paperwork inside." Henry stepped forward, trying to regain control. "There must be some mistake," he said. "This house belongs to my son and his wife." The man hesitated, then said carefully, "Well, whoever sold it had full ownership rights." That was the moment. The exact moment everything collapsed. Ethan reached for his phone, dialed again, and again, and again. My phone lit up, his name flashing across the screen. I didn't answer. Not the first time, not the second. Not the 10th, not the 20th. By the time it hit 40 calls, I was still sitting there, watching. Finally, I picked up my phone, opened his contact, and typed one message. Simple, clean, final. The house moved on. So did I. I hit send. Across the street, I watched his phone buzz, watched him read it. And in that moment, I saw it. Not anger, not confusion, not denial. Understanding. Patricia started arguing with the new owner. Henry raised his voice. Natalie began calling someone. Emma looked like she was about to cry. Tyler just stood there, stunned. Lila took a step back, then another. Because suddenly, this wasn't a romantic story anymore. It was real. And Ethan, he stood completely still, phone in his hand, eyes fixed on the house that was no longer his, the life that was no longer his, the version of me that was no longer waiting. The aftermath came quickly. Lawyers called, 3 of them, each one more uncertain than the last, each one backing down once the documents were reviewed, because everything I had done was legal. Precise, unbreakable. Ethan tried one last move, a public post, painting himself as the victim, claiming I had acted out of cruelty, out of spite, out of emotional instability. So I responded, not with anger, not with words, but with proof. A single image, him, in Italy, holding another woman, wearing a wedding ring that didn't belong to me. The internet did the rest. Because truth, when it's undeniable, doesn't need defending. Within days, everything shifted. Support turned into silence. Silence turned into distance. Distance turned into collapse. Even his family, the same people who stood behind him at that wedding, stopped speaking so loudly. And me, I didn't chase it, didn't celebrate it.
Didn't even comment on it again because I didn't need to. I folded the empty popcorn bag, started the engine, and drove away. Not slowly, not dramatically, just forward. Because in the end, I didn't take anything from Ethan. I simply stopped giving, and that was enough to make everything fall apart. A year later, my life looked nothing like it used to, and for the first time in a long time, that felt right. The apartment I had moved into was no longer empty. It had become mine. Not decorated to impress anyone, not arranged to accommodate someone else's preferences. Just intentional. A soft gray couch by the window. A bookshelf filled with things I actually read. A small dining table that didn't try to host people who didn't respect me. Fresh flowers on the counter because I liked them, not because I was trying to create a home. Everything in that space reflected one thing: choice. My choice. Work had changed too. Not dramatically, but meaningfully. I was more focused, more selective with clients, less willing to tolerate people who drained energy without respect. Because once you walk away from betrayal, you stop negotiating with discomfort. People asked me sometimes, "How did you move on so quickly?" I never corrected them, because from the outside, it probably did look quick, clean, efficient. But what they didn't see was that I had been letting go long before I physically left. Letting go of excuses, letting go of denial, letting go of the version of love that required me to ignore myself. So when the final break came, I wasn't starting from zero. I was finishing something that had already been ending. I heard things about Ethan, not directly, but enough. The relationship with Lila didn't last. Apparently, things that begin in dishonesty don't always survive reality. His family became quieter, less visible, less certain. Because it's easy to support something when it looks like a celebration. It's harder when it becomes a consequence. About 6 months after everything happened, I received a message from Ethan. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity is a quiet habit, so I did. I've had time to think. Maybe we could talk. Maybe try again. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, not because I was tempted, but because I was remembering. The woman I used to be, the one who would have paused, considered, hoped. But that woman was gone. I typed my response. Simple, honest, final. No. Then, after a moment, I added, "I didn't lose you. You lost me." I hit send. And that was the end of it. No anger, no drama, no second thoughts. That night, I stood on my balcony, a glass of wine in my hand, the city quiet around me, and I realized something important. Healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like clarity, because the truth is, Ethan didn't break me. He revealed something I needed to see, not about him, but about myself. I had been loyal, patient, committed, all the things people say make a good partner. But I had also been silent when I should have questioned, understanding when I should have set boundaries, present in a relationship that had already started to disappear. And I learned something from that, something I wish more people understood. Love is not proven by how much you endure. It's proven by how much you respect yourself within it. If someone lies to you, that's their character. If they betray you, that's their choice. But if you stay after seeing the truth, that becomes yours. I didn't leave because I was strong. I became strong because I left. And if there's one thing I would say to anyone watching this, anyone who feels that quiet discomfort in their chest, that instinct they keep pushing down, listen to it. Because the moment you stop ignoring yourself is the moment everything begins to change. I took a sip of my wine, looked out at the lights, and smiled. Not because everything was perfect,